problema è che affonderamo un milione di persone che nascono adesso
What do you make of it? Do you actually think it will yield some success? Are you optimistic, or do you think it's a fiasco that we didn't actually get the meeting of the leaders?
I think everybody else was ready here for the meeting of the leaders. Was saying that also President Trump, I think, was saying that the leaders level meeting could be there, but like I guessed, Putin doesn't dare to come really. So I think downplaying this shows that they are not serious about the real peace talks. I mean, this is clear for everybody, and I think it's important to see also that the whole world sees that Russia is playing games.
What are the consequences? Realistic to the idea that Albania can be part of EU in 2030?
Yes, I think Albania is making great progress when it comes to reforms, what are needed. So it is also for us on our side, European side, to make necessary steps. I mean, of course, we need reforms. We need to see that, for example, rule of law is respected and all these things. But I think there is this political momentum that everybody wants to see the enlargement process really happening. It's not only necessary for the Western Balkan countries, it's also necessary for the European Union to grow our economical but also geopolitical power. Okay, thank you.
One last question. Do you think that the Americans are realizing now that Putin does not want to negotiate?
Well, it's clear for everybody. I think you can see it very clearly. I mean, it has been always over two months.
Why? You can do it like this. Good morning.
Hi. Do it together.
Absolutely.
Fun, just me. Just make fun.
Any part of Ukrainian territory. So that was a very good meeting. I'm really looking forward today to the meeting with the foreign ministers here in Tirana. One at a time, please.
So you've said that you have been cautiously optimistic in the past, and you've had the talks with the NATO ministers. Now there are talks in Turkey. I want to know, considering we were hoping that the leaders would meet, and that's not the case.
No.
Do you think that it's been a failure? Do you think Putin is...
I think Putin made a mistake by sending a low-level delegation with this historian leading that delegation, who was also there in the talks in 2022. The ball is clearly in his part of the field now, in his court. He has to play ball. He has to be serious about wanting peace. So I think all the pressure is now on Putin.
And what's the expectation from...
What has to happen to... you understand that ball is not on his side of...
He realizes this. I know him very well. We did a lot of negotiations between when I was Prime Minister of the Netherlands. He knows extremely well that the ball is in his court, that he is in trouble, that he made a big mistake by sending this low-level delegation. And I think it is very good that the Ukrainians have come to the table. They have sent a delegation which is really willing to negotiate a ceasefire, etc. I'm so happy about the role the US is playing. It is really important. President Trump breaking the deadlock, clearly taking a lead on all of this, which is extremely useful and important. square mile of Ukraine.
And
Final
what's
question, then I have to go.
for security in Western Balkans?
I can just repeat the question because I had a very successful. I'll see you in a second. So I had a very good visit to the region. I had very good discussions also in Brussels with President Vučić. So NATO is very much helping to. Discussed yesterday, but can
Mr. Rutte, UK TV, very quickly, are you hopeful for some talks on Ukraine today?
I think Russia made a big mistake sending this low-level delegation with this historian leading it, who was also.
It's really important, but I think what it also shows is that Turkey is very much connected to the Russian cyber issues on different parts when it comes to crisis responding as well.
But do you have a deadline for Putin? Because both on his side, but he still don't play this ball.
Yes, he's playing games, which shows that they are not serious about it. That is.
But you have deadline that you're waiting for some decision of Putin, and after this date you will do some other stuff.
No, I mean we have been.
Unfortunately, Russia's war continues in Ukraine, so I know we will discuss this issue and we will ask for and demand for 30 days unconditional ceasefire because we know it's important. Ukraine wants it. Unfortunately, only Russia doesn't want a peace in our region. Therefore, if it doesn't happen, we will have to agree on next and further sanctions. Only that can stop Russia. So because all countries in Europe want security for their people, for their societies. I know that today as well we will discuss issues of illegal migration and better economic cooperation, which is a very important matter as well to Latvia, I know as well to Albania, and therefore we will use the CPC summit as a good platform to meet all the European leaders and discuss.
Rovško, ma avea tutta sera.
leader of Europe's, one of the Europe's member state countries, it's very important for us to get 30 days unconditional ceasefire in Ukraine as well as in the European region. I believe it's important
Donald Tusk,
in
UK
Europe.
media. Quick question on Ukraine.
So therefore, we'll see, because only Putin doesn't want peace. Therefore, we will follow up with next sanction list.
And then, so what happens next if the ceasefire talks fail? What is going to be the next step from the European side?
We have discussed that we will go with next sanctions, and I know that already 17 sanction package is agreed with a lot of shadow fleet inside it. I know that for UK as well, it's very important that we can follow up with next sanction list.
Welcome, Your Excellency. Thank you very much. This road is closed off, I'll have to get up there. Don't blame me for this weather.
You're persistent.
Welcome.
Verde.
Sixth summit of the European political community is currently underway in Tirana, Albania. Today is a very important day in the life of European political spectrum. Of course, this summit is taking place against the backdrop of a number of important developments, and there was some expectation yesterday expressed by some analysts that as a result of the direct talks underway between Russia and Ukraine, their delegations meeting in Istanbul, something could be attained there, and that agreement could be formalized into some form of agreement announced here in Tirana, Albania, but nothing eventuated from those claims from that particular proposition, of course. And today, the EPC, the sixth summit of the EPC, European Political Community, is taking place in Tirana. It's an important occasion, of course. EPC's own format could be understood as a combination, as a melange of two fundamental linchpins. You've got EU member countries, 27 EU member countries, plus those European countries that are not members of the European Union. And therefore, some analysts describe it as a Eurocentrism writ large. And of course, one criticism levied against EPC over the past 2 years has been that it's not institutionalized enough. Its scope is still evolving, and therefore nothing could be expected from the meetings taking place within its framework. But of course, there's another point of view, effectively saying that this is a political community, and therefore some time will be needed for it to assume a definable shape. And whilst we're talking about the nature and character of a European political community, allow me to inform you that currently in Tirana, in the capital of Albania, Albanian Prime Minister Edi Rama receiving heads of government and state, and this format involves many other Eastern European countries who are not considered to be inner core of the European continent, but still viewed as part of the wider European scope, and also Azerbaijani leader President Ilham Aliyev, Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan, and Georgian Prime Minister Irakli Kobakhidze are there too. President Aliyev arrived literally 5 minutes ago. He was received by his Albanian Prime Minister, and currently, as we see, heads of government and state are arriving in Tirana, and the plenary session is going to take place after this greeting ceremony, this red carpet ceremony, during which journalists are also able to put questions to the heads of government and state. It's an opportune time. Of course, 3 distinct opportunities will emerge throughout the day. One is this red carpet ceremony. Our very own Katie Wilson managed to pose a question to NATO General Secretary just a couple of minutes ago. So it's an opportune time now, and then of course there will be a plenary session, after which there will be a window opportunity wherein journalists will be able to ask their questions, and then there will be high-level roundtables. Of course, fundamental focus of this EPC, which is not a surprise to anybody, is about Ukraine, is about Ukraine's the fate, the negotiations that are currently underway, and the question of European security architecture. And the first roundtable, which will take place after the plenary session, will be dedicated to that particular theme. At a time when Europe's own centrality in the context of deciding upon the future of Ukraine is being increasingly questioned, in particular after President Trump's reascendance to power, it is absolutely critical for Europe to form this consolidated front against Russia at a time when this transatlantic alliance and its coherence is being increasingly questioned. And if we go back to July 2022, the original idea of EPC, actually, European Political Community, emerged almost immediately after the beginning of the war in Ukraine in February 2022. It was first proposed, and the idea back then was effectively hinging on the notion that if Europe wants to have a consolidated approach towards the battlefield circumstance in Ukraine, all European voices must be heard. naturally, as a result of that initial agreement attained, the first forum, inaugural summit, took place in Prague on the 6th of October. Those analysts who have been closely monitoring developments in this region, South Caucasus, remember the famous Prague Declaration, so-called Prague Declaration, because there was no actual document called Prague Declaration, attained on the 6th of October. And that document was about Azerbaijan and Armenia recognizing, amongst other things, each other's territorial integrity, leading to a breakthrough moment and eventually establishing and forming the realities that seem to pervade in the South Caucasus when it comes to Azerbaijan and Armenia. It's very interesting to note from the perspective of this region that both President Aliyev and Prime Minister Pashinyan are there. We remember, actually, in October 2022, when, together with Charles Michel and French President, quadrilateral meeting took place, as a result of which the agreement to which I made reference earlier was adopted. And that was very crucial, of course. And then President Aliyev and Pashinyan met in Chisinau in Moldova in early June 2023. That meeting wasn't particularly important in the context of shaping Azerbaijan and Armenian dynamics. But of course, then we remember Granada summit that took place. We also remember, of course, Granada meeting which took place, and also we're now currently observing that Antonio Costa is arriving, and it is important to note that this particular summit, it's worth stating it now because it's an opportune time, that emerged co-chaired by European Council President Antonio Costa and Albanian Prime Minister Edi Rama. It's co-chaired, and that's the usual format. So the either head of government or head of state of a given country which is hosting that particular summit, and together with a European leader, in this particular case, of course, Antonio Costa, European Council President, are co-chairing this particular summit. Before, the Europe was represented by Charles Michel. Allow me to also remind you that although it is Antonio Costa who is co-chairing together with Albanian Prime Minister this particular summit, many other top-notch European officials, representatives of European institutions, including Ursula von der Leyen and others, are present. And talking about Ursula von der Leyen, if my eyesight is entirely reliable, I believe she's arriving in Tirana, Albania now. She's on the red carpet. This particular presence and participation, I think, yes, indeed, my eyesight is perfectly reliable on this particular occasion. Ursula von der Leyen, EU Commission President, is in Albania, and of course, together with other European colleagues of her, attending this important summit. And of course, technically, from the point of view of official administrative representation, Antonio Costa is considered to be, in these sort of occasions, as number one person representing Europe, and Ursula von der Leyen's position is regarded as number two. So back to the essence and the character of the EPC. As I mentioned earlier, it was initially the idea emerged in July, in summer of 2022. So there is an inextricable connection between the circumstances that were given rise by the beginning of the war in Ukraine and its emergence. And it looks like that Ursula von der Leyen is actually being interviewed by journalists.
The European political community was once founded when Russia's war of aggression started. It was founded to shape a European answer and to make sure that we have stability on the European continent. Now we are 3 years on, and we could witness all during the last days President Putin's true belief. He first called for a ceasefire around the anniversaries of the 9th of May, which he then never respected. Then Ukraine, with the support of the European Union and the United States, called for full and unconditional ceasefire over 30 days, which President Putin then rejected. And finally, he offered a meeting directly between Ukraine and Russia in Turkey, but President Zelensky was ready to meet. President Putin never showed up. And this shows the true belief of President Putin. He does not want peace. So we have to increase the pressure. And this is why we're working on a new package of sanctions. This package will include, for example, sanctions on Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2. It will include working on listing more vessels of the Russian shadow fleet and also lowering the oil price cap. And it will include more sanctions on the financial sector in Russia. For us, it's important. We want peace, and therefore we have to increase the pressure on President Putin till he is ready for peace.
So you mean Istanbul is a failure?
Why is it going to South Caucasus?
As we were talking about the inextricable connection between the original idea that was at the very heart of European political community and its construct, the Ursula von der Leyen's comments actually reiterated that essential linchpin. The idea was first emerged, of course, in July, in summer 2022, after the beginning of the war in Ukraine. And today, Ukraine, subject of Ukraine peace negotiations, extent of European pressure, and that is a collective European pressure, including pressure emanating from EU institutions, United Kingdom, and perhaps to a certain extent from other non-EU member countries, seem to largely define the essence of Ukraine-related discussions here. And today there will be one high-level roundtable dedicated to Ukraine's security. As negotiations involving Ukraine are underway, it has quite often been questioned to what extent European institutions and United States of America actually act as in a coordinated fashion. And what Ursula von der Leyen says is that if Russia refuses to agree to 30-day truce, to the conditions explained and expressed by Ukraine and Ukraine's European allies, more sanctions will be applied in relation to Russia. This is a fundamental European position. We know that the latest package is actually ready. It has been formalized, and probably on the 20th of May, or maybe a few days after that particular date, they will be officially announced and then implemented. Of course, from the very beginning of the war, one of the key aspects of putting pressure on Russia and helping Ukraine in the context of defending its... And I just realized that British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is currently being interviewed by journalists.
Well, I think that what we saw
Let's hear to what the British Prime Minister is to say.
Putin is not serious about peace. He's been dragging his heels, and I think it's really important, therefore, that we have absolute unity with our allies. We'll be working on that again today to be clear that there must be a ceasefire, but also to be clear that should there not be a ceasefire, then we will act together in relation to sanctions. But for me, this is clear evidence that Putin doesn't seriously want peace. He's dragging his heels, and that's why today is a really important opportunity to work with colleagues to make sure that we are absolutely united. And President Zelensky will be here today, so we will be discussing the situation with him.
On the Brexit reset, how are the talks going? Will you have talks on the sidelines ahead of the Monday summit?
Well, in the last 2 weeks, you've seen the UK do a trade deal with India, really important for our country and our national interest. Trade deal with the US, again important for our country and national interest. I'm positive going into Monday, and I think that this is an important moment for our country that will be measured in the benefits to working people and their living standards. But we're positive as we go into the summit on Monday. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I have just heard from the British Prime Minister two important comments. One about Ukraine, about the necessity of standing together as European countries against Russia and in defense of Ukraine. And the second one was about, of course, post-Brexit UK trade negotiations with different nations, including India and to a certain extent United States. I think the second element is more internal European and sort of internal UK matter. The UK's the prowess to negotiate and conclude free trade deals after 2016 and after 2020, when Brexit came into force, has been increasingly, of course, questioned by many Remain supporters. And Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, looks confident that some of the deals that have been negotiated will be implemented in due course. And back to the original number one point made by the British Prime Minister, of course, the key sensibility here within the context of EPC seems to be based on that either Europe should stand together and sanctions regime should be taken into account very seriously, because that is where Europe is very powerful. Americans, of course, are, as many analysts would say, acutely conscious of the necessity of coordinating with Europeans, including Britain, about the sanctions regime, because most of the sanctions there, those crippling sanctions, are emanating from European institutions. And at the time when US looks more conciliatory, perhaps towards towards Russia, the European countries are ramping up pressure in order to compel the other side, Moscow, to some form of concession. And that seems that Russian analysts have been arguing from the very beginning that nothing has fundamentally changed in the collective Western position. Although Trump has changed something, but fundamental essence remains there. They are acting in coordination. And to a certain extent, what British Prime Minister is saying today could actually be used by Russians as a reiteration of their earlier stated positions. Are we expecting to hear something very conclusive today? I think that's a question that has been discussed amongst analysts as of today, and this has been in the air for some time. The importance of implementing crippling and devastatingly excruciating sanctions regime and adding new elements to that is something that European countries seem to be very determined to do, and in particular UK, in the light of its latest announcement. And many analysts believe that although Trump and coalition of the willing may not look like acting together, still the fact that Russian President Vladimir Putin offered to meet Ukrainian side in Turkey in the framework of direct talks, and then instead of visiting Istanbul or Ankara, actually in this particular case, himself sent a delegation described by Europeans and Ukrainians as low level, with President Zelensky using the term stand-up prop in relation to that, still testifies to their extent of collective Western pressure, which may eventually lead to some form of concessions coming from the Russian side. Of course, no one expects some sort of breakthrough regarding Ukraine talks today. The direct talks involving Russian and Ukrainian delegations are currently reportedly underway in Turkey. President Trump earlier said that if he's not there himself, if he's not going to, before he meets his Russian counterpart, nothing will fundamentally change. But still, direct talks could actually involve and could relate and could lead to certain progress in the context of technicalities, which are essential, and they have to be dealt with some underlings, perhaps. And that's the reason why many people believe that in some ways what we have observed in Saudi Arabia, both in Riyadh and Jeddah, in the shape of Americans negotiating with Ukrainians separately, and then Americans negotiating with Russians separately, with two sort of a trilateral track emerging into one trilateral track, is now actually becoming one bilateral track wherein Russians and Ukrainians talk to each other. And many analysts believe that for all the importance of Saudi Arabia and the amicable nature of the relations between Saudi Arabia and the United States, still there's an extra leverage that Turkey happens to have, because President Erdogan is effectively the head of state, only political leader across the world who can speak to President Zelensky and President Putin directly, happening to be in good terms with both of them and could bring them together. Having said that, what was very interesting to observe in the Russian media yesterday was the focus on the prospective meeting between Trump and President Putin, with some analysts, the Russian analysts, saying that Ukraine's fate will be discussed between Americans and Russians, and perhaps with Chinese leader, and the fundamental consequential decisions are not going to be made in Istanbul. So there are really competing visions of how the negotiations are taking place. Back to the circumstances that prevail in the Albanian capital in Tirana. Of course, this is an opening welcoming ceremony in many ways. The importance of this ceremony is largely, of course, officially it's ceremonial, it's a formality, but still, as you see, it's also an opportune time for world European leaders, heads of government and state, to respond to the questions posed by journalists, and of course later the self-same opportunities will emerge again.
që të ketë një takim në nivel krye
Në këtë moment që është Kosova, me këtë situatë që kemi brenda me samitin që bëhet dhe negociatorën e ri që është caktuar për ju, çfarë i kërkoni Shqipërisë?
Nga Shqipëria kërkojmë që të vazhdoj përkraja në raport me Republikën e Kosovës në disa aspekte. E para, që të vazhdoj të jetë e zëshme, siç ka qenë kryeministri Rama deri tani, për heqjen e masave të padrejta ndaj Kosovës, dhe e dyta që të flas sa më shumë dhe sa më zëshëm me shtetet që akoma nuk e kanë njohur Kosovën, në mënyrë që ato ta bëjnë një gjë të tillë, sepse mos njohja, sidomos nga shtetet anëtare të BE-s, po e dëmton jashtëzakonisht shumë Kosovën. Jo, dialogu s'do të jetë temë sot, sepse ky është forum multilateral, siç e dini. Faleminderit shumë.
Dy takime të kërkohet nga BE-ja, një takime
Ka takime dypalëshe?
Nuk ka. Jo, me Vučićin nuk ka asnjëherë në këtë summit takime dypalëshe. Takimet dypalëshe ndërmjet Kosovës dhe Serbisë, por edhe me ndërmjetësimin e BE-s, siç e dini, zhvilluan në Bruksel. Kështu që ky është një forum multilateral ku ne së Republikës së Kosovës synojmë më shumë të takohemi me liderët e tjerë, sidomos ata që duhet t'i bindim që të largojnë masat e padrejta ndaj Kosovës.
Mendoni fakti që po bëhet për herë të parë në Tiranë një samit i tillë dhe që ju jeni prezant tashmë, edhe pse keni ngërç mes Serbisë dhe Kosovës?
Ne gjithmonë jemi prezent në këtë summit. Kosova gjithnjë është prezent edhe në EPC dhe në summitin BE Ballkan Perëndimor. Ajo çfarë na favorizon këtu është se po shpresoj shumë që fakti që mbahet ky summit në Tiranë jap një zëmë të fuqishëm rajonit ton dhe edhe një zëmë të fuqishëm edhe Tiranës, jo vetëm Prishtinës, që të flas edhe për heqjen e masave të padrejta ndaj Kosovës, por edhe siç e përmenda për njohjen nga shtetet që akoma nuk e kanë bërë këtë në raport me Kosovën.
Ja, bëhet këtë kërkesë Bashkimit Evropian mbrëmjen
Patjetër që po, edhe mbrëmjen e djeshme, edhe më herët, edhe çdo ditë e bëjmë këtë kërkesë, sepse të gjitha kërkesat në fakt që BE-ja ka pas raport me Kosovën sa i përket heqjes së masave ne i kemi plotësuar dhe në qershor bëhet një vit që edhe vetë përfaqësuesi i BE-s zakonisht nuk ka përgjigje, kërkojnë gjëra kështu shumë abstrakte, deeskalim. Në fakt ne nuk jemi ata që kemi eskaluar situatën, por edhe pse nuk e kemi krijuar atë situatë në veri të Kosovës, Kosova ka ndërmarrë hapat që janë kërkuar.
Yes, indeed. Heads of government and state continue to arrive in Tirana, Albania, and representative of Kosovo is currently conversing with journalists. Of course, the country which has not been recognized by everybody, and there is a great deal of international legal uncertainty as to the status of this particular entity. As we see on the basis of our observations and on the basis of the information that we are receiving on a regular basis, the atmosphere in Tirana is slowly building up, and the portrait, the picture, these elements are sort of coalescing into some form of definable shape. One key sensibility that needs to be reiterated at this juncture is Ukraine. It is very much Ukraine-centered affair. It has been from the very beginning, all the way. and we see different heads of government and state being interviewed by, and also we see German Chancellor here, of course, and it would be very interesting to hear what he's saying now. Yes, we are. Yeah, German Chancellor currently conversing with journalists, and Germany's own contribution, own commitment to Ukraine's future is something that many European countries are actively discussing at this juncture. And there is a school of thought that Germany, because of its own past, is not as forceful and as dedicated, not just in terms of rhetoric, but also in terms of real-life, concrete contributions as UK and France. But it looks like that this stereotype is slowly and incrementally giving way to another reality, wherein Germany feels encumbered with this task and induced with a sense of purpose. Of course, this is the 6th summit of the European political community. It's worth remembering the first one, which took place in Prague, and that was the inaugural one. The circumstances leading the first one was exclusively, of course, related to the necessity of consolidated European approach in the wake of the beginning of the war in Ukraine. And we remember the second one, of course, which was in Moldova, in Chisinau. And we remember the third one, which took place in Granada, Spain, of course. And many other ones, of course, and there is the last one was in Hungary in October, just a few days before COP29, and in a very packed. And of course, remembering the past summits, allow me to say that the last two ones were in London, of course, in August 2024, and of course the very last one, the one preceding this one, took place in Hungary in October. Usually these summits shape in many ways the European approach. They reiterate already existing principles, and some very big announcements also cannot be excluded. And that's all for now. I think the ceremony is already practically finalized, and the plenary session will take place very soon indeed, which is going to be first consequential and substantial event of this summit.